Listen closely, because years are slipping away, quietly, while you work, while you wait, while you hope. Most men wake up too late to one terrible truth. Their lives were guided by forces they never chose. Ignore this, and you may never reclaim them. My friends, I want you to sit with me for a moment, not in haste, not in excitement, but in honest stillness, because the question before us tonight is not a comfortable one. Who is really controlling your life? You may believe the answer is obvious. You may say, I am. You may say circumstances. You may say fate. But I have spent more than half a lifetime studying men and women from every walk of life, the rich and the poor, the celebrated and the forgotten, the powerful and the powerless. And I tell you now, calmly, deliberately, with full responsibility for my words, most people are controlled without ever realizing it. Not by a tyrant with a whip, not by a visible enemy, but by something far more dangerous, a silent force, an invisible habit, a condition of mind. I call it drifting. You see, drifting does not announce itself. It does not shout. It whispers. It says tomorrow is soon enough. It says this is just how life is. It says you're doing fine. And years pass. Let me speak plainly now. You work hard. You rise early. You carry responsibility. You do what is expected. Yet deep inside, there is a quiet uneasiness, a feeling you rarely speak aloud, that despite all your effort, you are not moving towards something definite. You are moving through life, not directing it. And that uneasiness is not imagination. It is instinct. It is the soul recognizing that it has surrendered command. Most men never consciously decide to give up control of their lives. They simply never decide to take control in the first place. So control is taken from them by habits, by opinions of others, by fear disguised as caution, by routines that were never questioned. I have interviewed men who earned millions and men who struggled for bread. The difference between them was not intelligence. It was not education. It was not luck. It was this single fact. One group decided where they were going. The other merely reacted to what came. Drifting begins the moment a man stops demanding purpose from himself, when he allows life to answer for him, instead of answering life. Let me ask you something, and I ask it gently, but firmly. If I were to stop you on the street and ask you to state clearly, definitely, without hesitation, exactly what you are working toward, exactly what kind of life you intend to live, exactly what you refuse to settle for, could you answer, or would your words wander as your life has wandered? Now listen carefully. This is not a moral failing. It is not a lack of worth. It is a lack of definiteness, and definiteness, or the absence of it, is the steering wheel of human destiny. Andrew Carnegie once told me, and I repeat this because it bears repeating, that the world is divided into two classes, those who control their minds and those whose minds are controlled for them. The second group is always larger. Why? Because drifting is easy. Decision is hard. Purpose demands courage, and courage exposes fear. Most people are not controlled by other men. They are controlled by what they fear might happen if they step outside the familiar. Fear of criticism, fear of failure, fear of standing alone. So they compromise. They accept less and call it being realistic. They postpone dreams and call it being responsible. They silence their inner voice and call it growing up. But inside, something withers, and that something is the part of you that was meant to command. Let me be very clear now. If you do not take possession of your own mind, someone else will. If you do not choose your purpose, circumstance will choose it for you. If you do not decide what you believe, fear will decide, and fear is a cruel ruler. I am not here to accuse you. I am here to awaken you. Because once a man recognizes that he has been drifting, he faces a crossroads. One path leads to comfort, routine, excuses, and the slow erosion of self-respect. The other path leads to responsibility, mental discipline, and the terrifying but liberating act of choosing one's own direction. Tonight, I have not told you who controls your life. I have only shown you who might be. And in the next moment of our talk, we must confront the reason most people never escape that control. It is not weakness, it is fear, and fear, understood good, can be mastered. But first, you must be willing to look it in the eye. Now, let us move deeper, because once a man realizes that he may not be in control of his own life, a more uncomfortable question rises to the surface. Why does he remain that way? Why do intelligent men, capable men, hard-working men continue year after year in conditions they privately resent? The answer is not lack of opportunity. It is not lack of talent. It is not lack of effort. It is fear, not the kind of fear that makes you run from fire, but the quieter fear that settles into the mind and disguises itself as reason. Fear is the most efficient jailer ever known to man, because it does not need bars. It lives inside the mind. I have studied fear closely. I have seen it cripple ambition, paralyze initiative, and convince men to betray their own dreams while believing they are being sensible. Let me speak plainly. Most people fail in life for one reason alone. They allow fear to negotiate their decisions. Fear speaks softly. It rarely says stop. It says be careful. Don't risk too much. People will laugh. What if it doesn't work? You can't afford to fail. And because these thoughts sound reasonable, they are obeyed. This is how drifting tightens its grip. A man begins with a dream. Then fear introduces doubt. Doubt demands proof. Proof demands safety. And safety demands surrender. So the dream is postponed, not abandoned, just delayed. But delayed purpose is denied purpose. The most dangerous moment in a man's life is the moment he convinces himself that he still has plenty of time. Fear thrives in vagueness. It hates definiteness, because once a man decides clearly and firmly what he intends to do, fear loses its voice. But most people never make that decision. They wait for confidence before acting, not knowing that confidence comes after action. They wait for certainty, in a world that rewards those who move without it. Henry Ford did not wait for assurance that the world would accept his ideas. He decided first, and forced circumstances to follow. The drifting mind says, I will act when I feel ready. The controlled mind says, I will act and readiness will meet me on the way. Now listen carefully, because this truth is uncomfortable. Fear is not always loud. Often it hides behind respectable masks. It calls itself prudence. It calls itself tradition. It calls itself what others expect of you. But its result is always the same. A man lives a life chosen by default, instead of by design. There are 6 basic fears that dominate the human mind, and nearly every form of drifting can be traced back to one of them. Fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love, fear of old age, fear of death. Of these, the most destructive is the fear of criticism, because it enslaves without chain. A man afraid of criticism will silence his own ideas before anyone else ever has the chance. He will follow the crowd, not because he agrees, but because he fears standing alone. This fear explains why most people remain employees, even when they long for independence, why they tolerate dissatisfaction, rather than risk disapproval, why they repeat inherited beliefs instead of forming their own. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times, but he was immune to criticism because he was definite in purpose. A man with a clear aim does not argue with opinion. He moves. Now here is the deeper truth. Fear cannot dominate a mind that is occupied with purpose. Fear requires idle space. It enters when the mind is undirected, when thoughts wander, when imagination is allowed to run backward instead of forward. This is why drifting and fear always travel together. A drifting mind imagines consequences. A directed mind imagines outcomes. One worries about loss. The other plans for achievement. And here is where most people make their fatal error. They attempt to fight fear with willpower alone. But fear is not conquered by resistance. It is conquered by replacement. You cannot remove fear from the mind without filling that space with faith. Faith is not blind belief. It is the habit of expecting favorable outcomes because you have chosen a definite course. Faith grows through action, through repetition, through auto-suggestion. A man who daily reminds himself of his purpose, who feeds his mind constructive thoughts, who associates with others moving toward achievement, gradually finds fear retreating. But the drifting man does none of this. He leaves his mind open, undisciplined, unprotected, and fear moves in. Let me say something now that may disturb you. Most people do not actually want freedom. They want relief from responsibility. They want success, without the burden of self-direction. But control of one's life demands decision. It demands the courage to say, "This is what I choose." And once that statement is made, fear begins to lose its authority. So now you see the enemy clearly. Not circumstance, not other people, not the economy, but fear operating through indecision. In the next part of our conversation, we must arrive at a point where drifting can no longer hide, where the truth becomes unavoidable, and where a man either changes his thinking or resigns himself to being controlled. That moment is closer than you think. Now, we arrive at a point where there can be no more comfort, because there comes a moment in every man's life, whether he recognizes it or not, when the truth steps forward and demands to be acknowledged. This is that moment. Up to now, drifting has been subtle. It has disguised itself as routine, as obligation, as practicality. But now we pull away the covering, and what stands revealed is not pleasant to look at. Drifting is not neutral. It is not harmless. It is a decision to let life be decided for you. Most people imagine that control is something taken from them. They are mistaken. Control is something they hand over, one small choice at a time. A man does not wake up one morning and discover his life is no longer his own. He wakes up many mornings, having chosen comfort over courage, and one day realizes there are no real choices left. This is the breaking point. Because here is the truth, and I ask you to let it sink in slowly. If you are not moving toward a definite purpose, you are moving away from it. There is no standing still. Time does not pause. Habits do not remain neutral. Character does not stay unfinished. It is forming every day. Now let me ask you something that may strike deeper than you expect. Who decides how you spend your thinking time? Who chooses what occupies your imagination? Who determines whether your mind moves forward or circles the same worries year after year? If the answer is anything other than "I do," then control has already been surrendered. Most people allow their minds to be occupied by whatever is nearest. Daily problems, other people's opinions, news, worry, and they wonder why they feel tired without feeling accomplished. Mental fatigue without progress is the mark of drifting. The drifting man is always busy, but rarely fulfilled. Now here is the uncomfortable part. Drifting feels safe. It removes the burden of accountability. When a man drifts, he can always say, "It wasn't my fault. The times were hard. Opportunities were limited." But the man who chooses a definite purpose can no longer hide. He becomes responsible for his thinking, for his decisions, for his results. This is why drifting persists. Not because men are weak, but because responsibility is heavy. Yet here is the great irony. The same responsibility that frightens most men is the very thing that gives life meaning. Without it, existence becomes repetition. You eat, you work, you sleep, and years pass. I have seen men reach the latter half of life with a strange, quiet despair, not loud sorrow, not open regret, but a question that haunts them in silence. Is this all there is? That question is not caused by lack of money. It is not caused by lack of comfort. It is caused by lack of direction. Abraham Lincoln knew hardship. He knew failure. But he was never adrift. His mind was anchored to a cause. A drifting man has no anchor. So every storm decides his course. Now let us go deeper. The most dangerous enemy of purpose is not fear alone. It is procrastination. Procrastination is fear's favorite disguise. It does not say no. It says later. And later is the graveyard of intention. A man who procrastinates believes he is still choosing. In truth, he is avoiding the moment of decision. Every delay weakens resolve. Every postponed action strengthens habit, until one day, the man who once planned to decide can no longer decide at all. This is how control is lost. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but quietly, respectably, gradually. Now listen carefully. You cannot drift and be self-directed at the same time. One cancels the other. You cannot serve habit and command destiny. You must choose. This is the psychological breaking point. Because once a man sees drifting for what it is, he can never again claim ignorance. He may still choose comfort. He may still choose safety. But he will know the cost, and the cost is this: a life lived in reaction rather than intention. I want to speak now to something deeper than ambition, to self-respect. There is a part of you that knows whether you are living deliberately. You may silence it. You may distract it, but you cannot deceive it. That inner voice does not demand perfection. It demands direction. When it is ignored long enough, it grows quiet. And when that happens, a man may succeed outwardly while failing inwardly. This is the tragedy of drifting. Success without purpose is a hollow victory. Now, this is where the speech must turn, because recognition alone is not enough. Seeing the truth is painful, but it is also powerful. Once drifting is exposed, once fear is named, once procrastination is unmasked, there remains only one question: what replaces them? In the next part of our conversation, we will speak of transformation, not emotional excitement, not temporary motivation, but the quiet, disciplined shift that places control back into a man's hands. That shift begins with a single force: faith, not as belief without evidence, but as a mental attitude built through decision, repetition, and action. And once that force takes hold, fear can no longer rule. Now, we turn the page. Because once a man has seen the truth about drifting, once he has recognized fear and procrastination for what they are, he stands at the threshold of change. Not change imposed from outside, but change that begins in the mind. This is where transformation actually occurs, not in circumstances, not in luck, not in opportunity, but in mental discipline. Let me be very clear at the outset. Faith is not hope. It is not wishful thinking. It is not waiting for reassurance. Faith is the habit of acting as though your purpose is achievable before the world has agreed with you. Fear waits for proof. Faith creates it. And here is the essential truth most people never grasp. Faith is a developed state of mind. It is not inherited. It is not granted. It is trained. Every mind operates under suggestion. The question is never whether you are influenced. The question is by what. The drifting man allows suggestion from outside, from news, from gossip, from pessimism, from the doubts of others. The self-directed man chooses his suggestions deliberately. This is the principle of autosuggestion. What you repeatedly tell yourself in moments of emotion, with feeling and conviction, becomes accepted by the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind does not argue. This is not mysticism. It is cause and effect. A mind fed daily with fear produces cautious action. A mind fed daily with purpose produces courage. Now listen closely. The moment you define your purpose clearly, precisely, without apology, you give your mind a command. Until then, your mind wanders. After that, it organizes. Indefiniteness is mental chaos. Definiteness is mental order. This is why the first act of control is the formation of a definite purpose. Not vague ambition, not a general desire for more, but a clear statement of what you intend to achieve, why you intend to achieve it, and the price you are willing to pay. Most people avoid this step because it removes excuses. Once your aim is defined, you can no longer blame circumstance. So fear resists definiteness, but faith thrives on it. Now let me speak of discipline. Mental discipline is not harsh. It is protective. It means refusing to let your mind become a dumping ground for the fears of others. It means choosing your associations carefully. The mastermind principle is not merely cooperation of effort. It is protection of attitude. The people you think with shape the thoughts you think. A man surrounded by drifting minds will drift, no matter how strong his intention. But a man who aligns himself with others who think in terms of purpose absorbs courage without effort. This is why Andrew Carnegie gathered men who challenged him, who thought boldly, who believed in expansion. Faith multiplies in company. Now let us address action. Faith that does not move the body is incomplete. You do not wait until fear disappears to act. You act, and fear weakens as a result. Each step taken in the direction of purpose reinforces belief. Each avoided step strengthens doubt. This is the law. Now here is something crucial. Faith does not eliminate obstacles. It changes how you meet them. The drifting man sees obstacles as warnings. The man of faith sees them as signals of progress. Resistance is evidence of movement. Thomas Edison welcomed failure because it narrowed the path. A drifting man avoids failure because it threatens his comfort. Now let me slow down here, because this is the turning point. Control of your life does not arrive with noise. It arrives quietly. The moment you stop negotiating with fear, the moment you say, "This is my direction," and begin aligning daily habits with that decision. Faith grows through consistency, through daily reminders of purpose, through disciplined thinking, through deliberate action, not dramatic bursts, but steady command. And as faith strengthens, something remarkable happens. Your tone changes. Your posture changes. Your decisions become simpler. You stop asking, "What will people think?" and begin asking, "Does this move me toward my purpose?" This is mental sovereignty. This is self-command. And once achieved, it cannot be taken from you. Now we stand at the final threshold. We have exposed the controller. We have named the enemy. We have replaced fear with faith. What remains is the quiet power of a life lived deliberately. In the final part of our conversation, we will bring all of this together, not in excitement, but in resolution, not in force, but in calm authority. And when we finish, you will know without doubt who controls your life. Now, we come to the end, not an ending of words, but the beginning of understanding. because control of your life is not seized in a single moment of excitement. It is claimed through a settled decision and held through daily discipline. Let us return to the question with which we began. Who is really controlling your life? If you have listened carefully, you already know the answer. It is not chance. It is not circumstance. It is not other people. It is the condition of your mind. A mind without direction is governed by habit. A mind with direction governs itself. This is the dividing line between those who live deliberately and those who merely exist. Now let me speak calmly, because this truth does not require urgency. Once a man accepts responsibility for his own thinking, he becomes powerful in a quiet way. He no longer reacts to every opinion. He no longer rushes to defend himself. He no longer needs approval to proceed. He moves with inner agreement. This is what self-command looks like. It is not loud confidence. It is certainty without display. The drifting man is always explaining. The directed man is always progressing. Now understand this. You will not eliminate fear forever. You will not live without doubt. But fear will no longer decide. It may speak, but it will not vote. Your purpose becomes the authority. Every morning you rise with direction. Every decision is measured against it. Every setback is interpreted through it. This is how life becomes coherent. This is how effort turns into power. Most men live scattered lives. Their work, their thoughts, their desires pull in different directions. A man with a definite purpose brings his forces into alignment, and alignment creates momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence sustains faith. Now let me leave you with something deeply important. Success is not the possession of things. It is the possession of self-respect, and self-respect is born when a man knows he is living by his own design. Not borrowed beliefs, not inherited fears, not imposed limits, but chosen principles. This is what Lincoln had when he stood against division. This is what Ford had when others doubted. This is what every self-made life shares. Not perfection, direction. Now, there will be no trumpet, no ceremony. The world will not announce that you have taken control, but you will know. You will feel it when you choose action over excuse, when you replace delay with decision, when you think deliberately and act with intention. And one day, quietly, you will realize something remarkable. Life no longer happens to you. It moves with you. And in that moment, you will understand who has always held the power. You. And you will never drift again.